Welcome in, Bears fans, to Week 3 game recap. I am Mason West, and today I have Jacob Infante joining me to discuss this loss to the Indianapolis Colts, 21-16. How are you doing, Jacob?
Not great, honestly. That definitely left a bad taste in my mouth. Again, another game that should have been winnable. The Colts just kept handing it to the Bears on a silver platter, and it just didn't work out. So, I mean, I'm doing okay, like in my life, but as far as like this game goes, I mean, I'm not too happy with the result. But how can you be, honestly?
Yeah, I feel very different now than I did even at halftime. And we're going to go over why that is as this goes on. But I was pretty down dumps and just like burn it all at halftime. And now I think there are some silver linings we can attach to, but there's definitely some things we got to talk about that are pretty rough. So we're just going to dive right into it, our diagnostic study. So what are your overall thoughts fresh off that game?
Yeah, so I come off of it where, I mean, people are going to have their opinions on how Caleb Williams played today between the two interceptions, between the two touchdowns, getting over 350 passing yards. There are certainly ups and downs on, and extremes on both ends of the spectrum. I came away feeling good about how he played. I think that it's certainly going to take some time, and maybe he's a little bit more of, I don't want to say a developmental prospect, but he's maybe not so much of the sure thing, pro ready, CJ Stroud type numbers right out of the gate type of guy that, I guess some of us expected him to be, but he still looks the part of a quality quarterback. I mean, you've seen with his ability to, distribute the ball across the field, his ability to make full field reads, some of the accuracy, the zip behind his throws, the timing, the decision-making, definitely some encouraging flashes there. Obviously on a down-to-down basis, it's not quite there yet. And I think part of that is, affected by the fact the O-line just isn't very good. And I think it's, pretty safe to say at this point, this is roughly what we should expect the rest of the year, given the personnel they have and given the fact that there's probably not much more room for growth, honestly, unless somehow, they put in Karana Ogaji at guard for whatever reason. And, he proves to be better than Nate Davis or Matt Pryor did I get that right? Yep. Matt Pryor? Okay. Yep. I just want to make sure. I knew it was Pryor. I don't know. All these names are just blistering through my head right now. But yeah, this is my, my long-winded way of saying essentially that there's stuff to be excited about, as you alluded to. The defense looked pretty strong. They got gassed a little bit down the stretch. But, those first three quarters were very, it was a very good performance. All things considered, though, I mean, there are just too many things that need to be tightened up. And at this point in year 3, I don't know if Eberflus is the guy to do it. There's still plenty of time for him to, turn the course. And there are a handful of games that are certainly winnable. But I don't know, man. I don't know how you're feeling about this, but the long term, I feel still all right about where the Bears are headed. But the short term for this year, I guess I need to adjust my expectations a little bit.
And you're not alone in that. I definitely was someone who I thought that, I think if I recall correctly, 10 wins was what I was predicting. I definitely had this circled as a win on the schedule. So far, it's only week 3, and this is the first one that hasn't gone to plan as in terms of what I thought was going to happen, to be honest. And I mean, you talk about, some easy wins coming up. I mean, this was supposed to be an easy win. I mean, you look at if you go over 20 with 0 interceptions, you have a passer rating of 39.6. If the Colts won today with Anthony Richardson having a passer rating of 39.0, which is the lowest of any Colts team in a win since 1989. So you couldn't beat a team with that production. I mean, you look at him, 10 for 20, 167 yards, 2 interceptions, hence how we got that 39.0. And how you got there, it's so multifactorial. I mean, you touched on a bunch of the points, but, funky decisions. Really, the defense isn't to be at fault. They did what you're supposed to do. There was a short field, unfortunately, a couple different times, which that you're going to let up a score here and there. Jonathan Taylor is still a good running back, so that the fact that they were still able to keep him, what did he have, 110 yards? I mean, I'm okay with that, but obviously that could be better. I think the grander conversation, at least for me, when it comes to the ineptitude of this team, is offensively, not specifically with Caleb. There are things he didn't do well, like that throw to Rome, that was the interception.
Yeah.
Yes, you could point to like maybe a better play on the ball, but at the same time, that was a tight window that Caleb threw that into an ill-advised throw. So that's an issue. You could point to obviously the fumble that Caleb had. You cannot let Leo Tulatu come off the edge that wide. You have to force back inside to some help if you are Cole Kmet trying to make that block. Caleb could have gotten out quicker potentially. I'd have to look at the all 22 to exactly see what the routes were and everything like that. But you gotta have a better block from Cole. You can just kind of keep going down this road in terms of that. But then obviously you can just talk about the issues in the red zone. I mean, we can keep going and going with this. You mentioned Eberflus. I think you and I were on the same page. We thought he would be gone last year. We thought there was going to be a reset, bring in an offensive-minded coach, hitched his wagon to Matt Eberflus, and you're seeing the results right now, and it's a problem.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as good as the defense looks in some cases, I feel like they were, I don't think Anthony Richardson performed well. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. He didn't look like a good NFL starting quarterback. But even then, there were a couple instances of broken down coverage, of miscommunication in the secondary, of who's supposed to get who, of a zone being left completely wide open, whatever the case may be. And to that point, I mean, the defense performed well. You could argue they could have performed a little better, but it's year 3 now. All 3 years so far, the Bears offense has been bad under Matt Eberflus. The play calling has been poor. Some of the time management has been a little bit questionable. I still don't understand that timeout they used in the goal to go situation when the Colts had the ball with like 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
What is to gain there with that timeout? I don't know.
Exactly. I mean, and they ended up scoring anyway. And, it's one fewer timeout that you have, down the stretch when you're down in what's, a close game. So that just stuff like that at this stage. I mean, you've been a head coach for 3 years. There's no excuse for it. You need to be making better decisions with time management. And there's certainly a lot to be concerned about, I guess, with, the performance of Shane Waldron as a play caller. And, I keep going to coaching. It's not to say Caleb Williams was perfect, because I feel like in this specific climate, people think, oh, you're blaming the offensive coordinator, you're blaming the head coach. That means your quarterback in this loss is completely exonerated of all blame.
Right.
That's absolutely not the case. I mean, Caleb, I'd say he looked like a good rookie. I think that's the way I'd put it, is in terms of the performances you're going to see from a numbers standpoint, I'd be shocked if there are too many rookie quarterback performances that top 363 passing yards. Yeah. I'd be shocked if, some of the tight windows that were hit by Caleb, if there's a rookie quarterback who can consistently make as many of those as Caleb did today. But at the same time, there's still some questionable decision-making. Like you mentioned, that throw into the tight window, with Odunze, they could have potentially, I can't blame that on Rome, honestly, because that's 2 defenders in the area. That's tough to come down with. I'd put that on Caleb because, it's just very low percentage shot to make. But all things considered, though, to say Caleb could have done better, yes. I feel like the pieces are there for him to be very good down the line. But unfortunately, those pieces, I think, are mostly internal with what he has and are less pieces that are in this coaching staff, I guess is the best way that I could put it.
I think that's a valid point. And then you still continue to look around the team. And again, some of this we'll dive into deeper as for some of the sections that we have coming up. But you look at the lack of the run game still today. That's still a problem. Right? That's not a Caleb issue. That's an offensive line play calling issue when you combine those. And also it's a DeAndre Swift issue, which we can definitely dive into. But there's that. There's still leaky on the offensive line and the pass pro as well. Just too many times where Caleb has to kind of magic man some stuff. And sometimes it turns out really well. And then other times, there's a couple of deep balls that he missed. But, how much do I fault him when he's having to roll out to the left, throwing it across a little bit? I don't know. It's hard to say. I think DJ Jazz had a valid question because we're kind of on this topic. Are we repeating the same thing we did with Fields, keeping a coach for too long and panic hiring for a new one the next year? Are we going to stunt Caleb's development? Maybe-ish a little bit. I mean, you can't develop as much in this environment with what's going on right now as if you had a really good one. I mean, that. I know I I was of the thought process that I wanted a new head coach, even if Eberflus was doing good, if not great, to be honest, with how the defense was looking. Part of the biggest thing, the main thing, because of the cycle, right? I wanted a head coach paired with a new rookie quarterback together on the same timeline with the same offensive coordinator, so that, you were able to stack a couple years together. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, Eberflus stays and even just Waldron were to leave, if that were the case, I mean, that's not good. And even if Eberflus and Waldron both go, that's still not great. So is it as great of a development as it could be? I don't know. The answer is very clearly no. I mean, it's based on what we're seeing. But we're seeing week-to-week improvements from Caleb regardless, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. And I think there's definitely some PTSD that comes with, hey, the Bears just fired their head coach with a rookie quarterback. It's going to be year 2 in the NFL, and it's year 2 from, learning a new playbook. But this isn't impossible necessarily for that to happen and for a quarterback to see success. Obviously, it hasn't worked for the Bears. And I really want to try and avoid being that guy where it's like, oh, it didn't work for all these people, but it might work for us, like that one Arrested Development quote or whatever. But I mean, you do see like Justin Herbert, he was with Anthony Lynn his first year, looked really good. The Chargers still fired him. I don't think anybody has any concerns about if Justin Herbert's a good quarterback or not. With the Jacksonville Jaguars, Urban Meyer was Trevor Lawrence's head coach in the first year. Obviously, they got rid of him for a variety of reasons. And Trevor Lawrence, I think it's fair to say he's a pretty good starting quarterback. Even if the Jaguars aren't a juggernaut by any means, even if the Chargers aren't a juggernaut, I wouldn't chuck that up to, oh, they switched head coaches heading into year 2 for Herbert and Lawrence respectively. I think that's hardly the case. I think there are a lot of other different factors that are the reasons that those teams aren't quite powerhouses. Although I will say, the Chargers, there's some room to, be excited there. I think, they lost today, but, still being 2-1, it's a good start to the year. So all that said, it's not impossible to say, oh, if it's truly best for the organization, if it's truly best for the team, and you feel good about who you're replacing Eberflus with, then sure, I'd go for it. And that's still something I'd probably look to do. It's not a perfect situation, but I wouldn't look to keep Matt Eberflus around and Shane Waldron around if they're performing poorly, just for the sole purpose of continuity. Yeah, like Chris says here, keeping a coach for continuity is a bad idea if that coach just flat out sucks. I think that that's a good point in the grand scheme of things. So that's where I'm at with it right now. Obviously, there are pros and cons to both, but I think we're seeing, at least in spurts here, that Caleb, he's capable of grasping a playbook. He's capable of making smart decisions with the football. Now, is it happening on a down-by-down basis? I wouldn't say that yet, but I'd say that again, it comes down to the flashes here, and it's a different conversation than what we're having with Justin Fields, whether, it's the flashes in year 3 of his NFL career, or right now it's the flashes for him in year 4 with the Steelers. This is a rookie quarterback. Of course, you're not going to step in and be like, oh, he's perfect. And I feel like some people might have hyped him up to be, he's going to be the single season passing leader that the Bears have ever had. He's going to be an elite quarterback right out of the gate, which I don't think was necessarily fair to him. From a team perspective, I think expectations were too high, myself included. I know we were talking a little bit before, we've hopped into it. We're thinking like, we were expecting this to be like a 10-win team. Right now, it doesn't necessarily look like that's going to be the case. But I mean, hey, it's still early in the season. Anything can happen. I'm just saying right now, the start from what we're seeing from this coaching staff isn't necessarily promising.
Let's take a quick break. We're getting a word from one of our newest sponsors, and then we'll dive into the rest of this. We got that dog in us. It is the greatest time of the year again. Football is here, and it's here to stay until February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Signing up with Underdog is smooth and easy. I especially like using their mobile app, as it makes making picks easy as hell. Something pretty cool is their vulture protection. Get your entry refunded and receive a promo if a vulture leads to a loss. define vulture as a rushing touchdown scored by a player not designated as a running back. They have like a list that you have to look at. I also love the variety that you have compared to the other betting site apps, such as their 4-person battle royale. Just pick players for the week and profit. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code CITY, C-I-T-Y, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code CITY, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 21 plus, Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus, Alabama, Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned about your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 4667369. Underdog. It's pretty cool.
There you go.
First thing we got here, so as we thought and not. So this is something that we expected to happen that did, and something we were surprised by in this game. Jacob, what did you expect?
So I expected that the Bears would generate multiple interceptions off of Anthony Richardson. And looking at, his start to the year, it's not a stretch to say he's been pretty careless with the ball, honestly. So for the Bears to have come away with 2 interceptions, I'm not necessarily surprised. Coming into the week, I could be wrong. I believe I said it was going to be Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson who are going to get the interceptions. It ended up being Jalen Johnson and Tremaine Edmonds, with that Tremaine interception coming in the end zone, which, again, that's another thing I think, kind of bailed out this Bears offense and kept him in the game, is the fact that, Anthony Richardson just threw a boneheaded play, had a boneheaded throw directly to a defender in the end zone, and they were on the verge of scoring anyway. So I think that's one thing I wasn't necessarily surprised about. From a Colts perspective, I feel like it would have made so much more sense if they ran the ball with Richardson a little bit more, because especially down the stretch, that run defense started getting tired. But as far as things that I didn't expect to happen, I guess I was expecting a little bit more out of the Bears run game. And I don't want to go into it saying, I thought DeAndre Swift was going to run for 100 yards. That wasn't nearly my expectation. But to put it lightly, just, the poor yards per carry performance, the poor consistency from a down-to-down basis, I wasn't expecting that against what entered this week as the worst run defense in the NFL. And when you're coming away with, you're making $8 million a year and you're averaging under 2 yards per carry on a consistent snap-to-snap basis, 1.5 yards a carry, and you don't have a single run that goes for over 4 yards, that's not acceptable. I mean, that's the type of production where, and I tweeted this out earlier, you could sign someone from free agency for veteran minimum. You could sign somebody from the street right now, and they'd put up the exact same production, and you could have an extra $7 or so million that you could use for other positions along the offense or on the roster, whatever, what have you. And it looks even more confusing when you realize this was the first move not only the Bears made in free agency, but that anyone made in free agency. If you remember, the second that the NFL free agency started up, DeAndre Swift to the Bears was the first notification that hit our phones. And they rushed, they jumped at the bit to sign him. And this is the production we're getting. And I think that sure, you can argue the offensive line hasn't provided him too many opportunities. I agree. But if you're paying a running back that much money, you're expecting them to make more out of less. I don't know. I'm trying to watch my language here, but the chicken salad quote, I guess, is what you'd expect out of a running back that you're paying big money to. And Swift hasn't done that. And there's nothing wrong with a running back who takes what the offensive line gives him. That's a majority of the NFL right there. But that's not a player you pay $8 million to at the running back position. So I guess that's something I was expecting more out of. Maybe that's on me going forward. I'm not going to expect any more than 2 yards per carry out of Swift for the rest of the year. And then anything that comes out of that is going to make my day. So that's just where I'm at with him. My expectations weren't incredibly high, but man, I wanted something, and we didn't even get anything.
We knew, as if you watch football, you knew after his time with the Lions and after his time even with the Eagles that there's a certain thing that DeAndre Swift had done well and didn't do well, right? I mean, he did relatively well running outside the tackles and did well as a pass catcher and didn't do well running between the tackles. Now, you have to take that into account when you're thinking about the team you're trying to build, right? Are you trying to be an outside zone team, an inside zone team? Are you trying to be more of a duo team, all that kind of stuff? And so far, it seems like there's a bit of a clashing between the kind of running style that they want to be as the Bears and what Swift provides you. And even what he does do, man, I've never seen a running back in a Chicago Bears uniform who falls so easily at first contact, and usually he falls backwards.
Yeah.
And you have Roschon, who is at least, even if he gets hit at the line, there were two different plays I remember I thought of this where Roschon gets hit pretty much at the line of scrimmage and still falls forward for 2 yards. There was another one on to the outside, I believe it was in the third quarter, where if it was DeAndre Swift, that would have absolutely been stuffed. Roschon has a nice little bounce, gets another 2-3 yards. And that's not even just for the inside or even outside zone runs. I mean, the Bears are running these pitch plays that should be right up their alley. And this also dives into the setup by the offensive coordinator in terms of who's blocking who and what that all looks like. But right now, this run game is anemic. So as we thought. So I thought this defense is good for the Bears. It is. Were there some issues there? You talked about some of the coverage issues. Well, there was about one in particular, deep shot that, again, I got to look at the all-22 to kind of see what the issue was there. But Brisker was in the general, vicinity on that play. Was he not playing over the top appropriately? Was that not pass off well? Was it more of a cornerback issue? I'm not sure. But that was a big play that was an issue ultimately for the Bears and led to a score there. But the Bears, even with Richardson kind of handing them some gimmies, right, you still got to make the play. So the fact that they were able to stop the Colts in the red zone, get that interception, that was gift wrapped, but still you got to make the play. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
The still fact that, Jalen Johnson has not necessarily been a guy that's known to get his hands on too many balls and hold on to them. Like, he hasn't got a lot of interceptions, but he did have one today. That was great. If your defense can keep a offense, even one that's not necessarily as great as the Colts are, to 21 points, you should still be in the game. So if you can average in that 15 to 20 points per game as a defense, I mean, you're a very good unit. I was surprised by the Colts pass rush. I thought without DeForest Buckner, that wouldn't be quite as impactful. You saw they ultimately ended up with 4 sacks. Don't have the hurry numbers or anything like that, but if you watched the game, you saw that there were a lot of times that Caleb had to kind of jib and jive in the pocket. He had to extend plays. I thought in the second half they got a little better with a couple more rollouts, things like that, so that got away from the pressure. But I was surprised they generated as much pressure as they did without DeForest Buckner. With you had Leatu Latu, who missed a lot of the week. He had a big sack, that strip sack on Caleb, so that definitely surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's completely fair, and I think a lot of this just comes down to, and again, when we say these opinions on how the game turned out, we're going to go back and watch the all-22, go back and watch the tape, see how things turned out as the way that they think they are. But I think a lot of it came down to, again, the offensive line just not knowing assignments, and I guess even more so, some one-on-one just misses, honestly. And the Colts didn't blitz necessarily as much as I thought they would, coming off of what we saw the Texans do against them. I know the Colts necessarily aren't a super blitz-heavy team, but still, I was expecting a little bit more in that regard. But I think a lot of it came down to those 4-man rushes. The Bears just flat out lost those. And we'll have to see exactly who was at fault for some of those. I just think, this offensive line, some of the miscommunication, it needs to be fixed. And regardless of, you have Pryor in there now instead of Nate Davis, it's a new offensive lineman. That's still 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen who are still the exact same from week to week. And it hasn't mattered if Davis is at guard, if Pryor's at guard. It doesn't matter if Bass is in at guard. There's still been that miscommunication regardless. So that doesn't make me think, that's just because of the instability at right guard currently. It's just everywhere.
And it's not just a communication issue. Sometimes they're just getting worked, right?
Yeah.
The Matt Pryor gave up a sack, and it was because his hands were tucked inside for some weird reason. He was like trying to block his elbows, made no sense. And I believe it was 80-80, just absolutely ran him over. And he hasn't been able to do anything last year as a rookie or this year. I'm talking about 80-80 on the Colts in particular.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was able to do that to Pryor, I mean, that's just I'm going to that's a technique issue. That's a one-on-one issue. So you got both communication and you have like technique issues. That is a problem.
Yeah, no, 100%.
One thing I did want to highlight here, the comment by DJ Daz. I don't blame Swift. I blame our O-line. Wait a second. I got some stats that are going to highlight why Swift is also a problem. Keep an ear out here. It's going to be a good day. This is where we get to be positive. Something to highlight that we are excited about. I'll just dive right into this. Caleb, I think even with the issues he had, to me as a rookie in week 3 with what he had at his disposal or lack thereof at times, I would consider this a ball out game for him. The fact that he had 213 yards at the half. He had 363 yards total. The Bears ended up with receivers at 112 yards at Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet at 97, and DJ Moore at 78. I mean, if I just told you those stats, you'd probably think that you won the game. I mean, that's really good, especially knowing the Bears defense. So you also look at it where, I mean, he had the 2 interceptions we were talking about. We don't have to dive super heavy into that, but I mean, even the longs. I mean, he found a little bit of that the deep ball today. He had a 47-yard pass to Rome, a 44 to DJ Moore. This is where the positivity starts to come into play. His eyes are in the right place. A lot of his timing the timing is good, really, really good at times, a little funky at other times. And then you see the footwork is good at times, a little funky at other times. For me, sitting here watching these games is very, very different than watching either Justin Fields previously, Mitch Trubisky previously. I hate to say his name, but Glennon previously, where Caleb's ability to navigate a pocket, I've never felt as comfortable seeing how he's always looking to still pass.
Yeah.
Right? Especially with the Justin Fields era we had. And I was a big Justin guy. You know that. A lot of people know that.
Yeah.
It was a first read's not there, head goes down and run. It's still amazing to me to see someone truly either within the pocket or while you're extending, still trying to work downfield. And sometimes it's at a detriment because he's held the ball a little too long at times. But at least it's modern, explosive, attempted football.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I'm with you there to the point, you're watching the tape and you see just from a mental capacity, I feel pretty confident saying right now that Caleb has much better pocket awareness than Fields or Trubisky. I mean, or Glennon for that matter. But, I think that you bring up a good point. When he scrambles, he's still looking to throw. I think, he's a throw first type of guy. Run if you absolutely have to. And I mean, sure, I'd argue there are some times where maybe he could be better off running instead of going for the deep ball. And at this point, maybe at a certain stage, the game's going to slow down even more for him. The chemistry with the receivers is going to develop. He can hit some of those throws. But still, I like the fact that he's scanning the field. He's consistently trying to look for the open man. And I feel a lot better about him being able to step away from pressure. I feel a lot better about him being able to get a sense for what's going on the field than I have with, a handful of these Bears quarterbacks in the past. So time will tell exactly. I feel like Caleb knows that there's still room for improvement on him specifically. But at the same time, I can look at it and be like, all right, there's definitely something there.
Yeah. Because, to your point, Caleb had 1 rushing attempt for 8 yards. That's kind of, give me 3. I think there's at least
something. Yeah.
What's your positivity here? It's going to be a good day.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick with Rome Odunze here for this one. I think that, the first 2 weeks he did a pretty good job of getting open. Just some of, the separation was solid. It just, there's sometimes they didn't get him the ball. And I think that him coming in, topping 100 receiving yards, getting his first touchdown, I think that was a huge for him. And I think he looked the part. Obviously, being a bigger guy, he moves very well for someone who's as tall and as built as he is. Some of the separation he showed down the field was impressive. Some of the agility after the catch. the sense of weak spots in his zone coverage and the ability to, I guess, vary your tempo and the ability to work yourself open. And obviously we'll, go back to the tape on that to see exactly, what some of those top plays were. But it just seemed like Odunze he did a pretty good job of getting open for the most part. And I think that's really encouraging. Caleb did a good job of finding him more often than not. And I'd have to go back and check. I could be wrong on this, but outside of that one double team throw that Caleb had to Rome that ended up getting picked, out of those 11 targets, I'd say 10 of them are like, all right, I understand why you made that throw. And maybe I'm missing like one or two or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but it just seemed like Odunze was pretty consistently winning his battles, and watching him put up the numbers that he did is very encouraging after a little bit of a slow start to the year. I feel good about the chemistry that Odunze and Caleb have down the field, being able to make a couple of those plays. I think that, settling in with your buddy like that, and Caleb struggled a little bit with the deep ball the first two games, and to start this week 3 game, felt a little bit more comfortable once he started including Odunze in the mix. So I think that's one where I feel pretty confident in. I feel pretty good about how he performed, and now I can look at it going forward as, all right, he can be a good contributor, even if he's not always going to be the team leader in targets like he was this week, tying with Cole Kmet for 11. I still feel like he's going to contribute on a pretty weekly basis.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. And the fact that going forward, even if other things are not right on this team, the fact that it feels like your quarterback and one of your better receivers is right, that it's going to be something that can progress and develop moving forward, that gives you more flexibility in future seasons to be able to address and embolden this team. Obviously, yes, I'm disappointed being 1-2 right now, but again, this is honestly like I predicted 2-1 at this point, so we're still not totally off the rails here. Everyone keep in mind it's week 3, but it's not just about this year. We have this thing that sucks right now, where mentally, as a fan base and as a football world, we've gotten into this. We have to use every single ounce of this rookie window and squeeze everything out of it, just because of how quarterback contracts and things like that have gotten to the point that they've gotten to. And it, I think, takes us away a little bit from understanding, like, and the CJ Stroud season sucks. The CJ Stroud season ruined rookie development because he did so well. But if you could somehow remove that for everyone's football brain, and you could see truly the trajectory that both Rome and Caleb have taken, you'd be like, okay, like we are heading in the right direction.
No, absolutely. And it's something where I can look at it and feel pretty confident, all things considered, in just the offensive performance, not necessarily in the offensive line or in the play calling, but I can look at it as Odunze looked good. Caleb looked good. I mean, DJ Moore looked pretty solid. I think everyone's going to talk about Odunze and Cole Kmet getting 10 catches, getting back involved in the offense. But now you can look at it too as, DJ Moore, even if it's a quieter 8 catches, 78 yards, that's still a pretty good game.
I was literally just going to ask. When I went back and I looked at the stats, just throw this together, I was surprised he had 8 catches for 78 yards.
Yeah.
It didn't feel that impactful. I know there's a couple passes, those weird screens that they refused to get out of the playbook that get you almost, they got DJ almost killed on one play and haven't been that successful. Why do you think that 8 receptions on 10 targets, 78 yards didn't feel quite as impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, you had that 44-yard gain, which, made up a lot of those yards, a lot of those targets were.
Yeah, the Hail Mary, really.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because the deflection that Moore ended up catching. They're only short gains, and a lot of them being screens, a lot of them being targeted along the perimeter, just short passes. I don't know. I'm not a fan of wide receiver screens just from a philosophical standpoint, but especially with the execution that we're seeing. And there are a couple plays where, you're relying on, DeAndre Carter, who's, a solid depth receiver, for him at 190 pounds being a lead blocker for Cole Kmet. And another instance, I mean, you had DeAndre Carter trying to chip block Tyquan Lewis, not going to work out, and it didn't. But I guess the heavy reliance on wide receiver screens and them just not working. I mean, DJ Moore is able to catch a lot of those, but I chalk that up to scheme. And then the Hail Mary was in just a little bit of a weird play. So if you're looking at it, if you subtract that, it's 7 catches for 34 yards. And that's not great.
That's not great.
That's not great. And DJ can only do so much. There are a couple plays, he'd be able to, I think it was his first or second catch was just a short little dump off, able to make some guys miss and pick up the first down. But again, if the blocking's not there on those types of screens, which they haven't been to this point, then it's going to be really tough for even a talented guy like DJ Moore, who's really good after the catch, to be able to make anything out of it. So it was a weird game from DJ Moore. He did what he was asked to do. It's just what he was asked to do, I disagree with.
Couldn't agree more with that. Next section, concussed corner. Something in the game that was so odd, the decision maker must have been concussed. I'm going to keep mine simple. It was that entire thought process when it was goal to go. The Bears are, banging on the door to score. I am fine with the first and second down runs. Fine, sure. I mean, you have 4 or 5 yards to go. Power through, assert dominance. You haven't been able to this entire season, but sure, let's try it now. Really, it was the next two that didn't make sense to me. The 3rd and goal, where you have, with 1 yard to go, running from shotgun philosophically doesn't make sense when you look at how the defense is lined up against you. And then on 4th and 1, to run an option out of pistol and lose 12 yards. You didn't draft Caleb Williams to run the speed option. You drafted him to, do a play action if you want to. That's fine. Yeah. But then let him cook. Let him try to find. And we saw that later in the game when he was able to find Cole Kmet in the flat for a touchdown. I would much rather have as many outs as possible. Once you hand that ball off, you've decided what you're doing, and that is it. That's the only option. If you let Caleb, whether it's play action or not, let him try to filter through and find the hole in the defense, you have multiple, and then you can run it. You have multiple options in terms of how that could turn out. To me, it was scared play calling at the end of the day by Shane Waldron, potentially because this was after Caleb had thrown that interception. But that makes no sense to me in terms of how that was operated.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And honestly, that was going to be the one where I'm looking at it as like, what were they even thinking? And with you go back to that drive, the Bears were moving the ball down the field, and so much of that was through the pass.
Yep.
Caleb Williams was doing a good job of hitting his guys in motion, doing a good job of hitting his guys in stride. Just slowly but surely, moving the ball down the field. And I think that if this Bears offense looks like that, say it's consistent, like 10-yard gains in the passing game, I'd be happy with that. But they overthought it, and they looked at it like, oh, it's what is it, like first and it was down at the 5-yard line, and I believe it was the 5-yard line, and they had 5 plays, all of them were runs, and not a single one was a passing attempt. Not a single one went back to the roots of why that drive was successful in the first place. And like you said, going back later in the game, they were able to hit Cole Kmet on the flat. He was wide open. I would love to see some sort of play action, especially you say after those first 2 runs didn't work or something like that, just to be able to mix it up a little bit. And given the looks that the Colts defense was showing, it doesn't make sense. And to that point about the shotgun runs, it annoys me. Like I want to say, I think it was Matt Forte who tweeted it out. It's like, if you run out of the shotgun in, goal to go situations, like that, only the good offensive lines can do that consistently.
Yep. Because
just naturally that's more yards that the running back has to make up once he gets handed the ball off, because it's like, oh, the quarterback's just staying here, I'm going to hand the ball off. It's a much more difficult assignment for the running back as opposed to, hey, just charge straight forward on your way there. The quarterback's going to hand you the ball off. It's a much easier assignment in short yardage situations, and teams, the Bears in this case, just keep overthinking it. And I don't know. I wasn't a fan of just spamming run the entire time. But at the same time, they could have schemed those run plays better than they did. And then the option just a disaster for a variety of reasons. So
I didn't realize we were playing college football 25.
I know. Yeah. It's like someone who, who likes the option because it's fast, it's cool, whatever. It's like, but philosophically, why would you call that? Like, why is that the move that you're going with? So I don't know. It's just that drive. That's the one I'm sticking with too, is just, it doesn't make sense in the slightest.
And then, of course, I mean, we could always have a deeper and probably like hour-long conversation about the ins and outs and intricacies and issues that right now exist within just the core of what this offense is. And, we talked about the screens already. We've talked about putting the ball in or out of Caleb's hands. We're talking about personnel decision-making, the fact that you go back to the difference in tight end usage week 1 to week 2, all this other stuff. But, I mean, that's a whole thing that we don't have time to get into. But I'm curious at how that'll progress as we move forward. We here for moral support. So this is an area we'd like to work on going forward, like something we'd like to see different, potentially even in week 4. What do you have here?
Yeah, so in this stage, I'd like to see I'll put this to the coaching staff especially, because I want to see a little bit more like different personnel out of the backfield. I think we're getting to the point where it's 3 weeks. DeAndre Swift being the lead back isn't working.
Yeah.
And Roschon Johnson didn't even look great, but he still looked way better than what we saw out of DeAndre Swift. So Khalil Herbert, and it didn't look amazing by any means either, 4 carries, 9 yards. But I think that it's pretty clear that unless things change in terms of how you're calling those run plays and in terms of how the offensive line is determining, and executing on their assignments, that DeAndre Swift is, him being the lead back isn't a fit right now. So that's something I want to see them work on, diversifying the carries a little bit more. And I guess they did a better job of that today than they did in previous weeks. But I don't know, man. I don't know how you feel, but I think this is an opportunity, where, Travis Homer got hurt, Roschon Johnson's back being active. I want to see him being utilized more.
Yeah.
And not even to think, I think he can be a long-term starting running back in the NFL. Because, again, there's still some question about, is he going to be able to be, anything more than just a decent backup, which I don't know if he can be. But I want him to have the opportunity to find out, because he's been better than Swift so far. Swift has – a lot of running backs have been better than Swift so far, not just on the Bears, but league-wide. So that's one thing I want them to work on is, having the wherewithal to say, hey, the way things are going right now, it's not working. We need to mix things up. And, whether it's personnel, whether it's, play calling, they haven't shown much in the way of improvement or adaptability at this stage. So we'll see if that comes in due time, but it hasn't right now. I'm hoping that something will change personnel wise in the run game.
I had the exact same thing. I have written here less snaps for DeAndre Swift, at least as the lead back. In the first half, DeAndre Swift had 8 rushes for 6 yards. That's good for 0.8 yards per carry. He had a rushing success rate, according to True Media, of 0%. Roschon Johnson had 6 carries for 18 yards, 3 yards per carry. Math, that's better. 3 is better than 0.8. Now, is it substantial? Is he Saquon Barkley? No, he's not. But they have the same offensive line. They're running the same plays, and that is a substantial difference. Herbert, he had 4 carries for 9 yards in the first half, right? And, of course, we know 2 of his carries ultimately were the ones where he was at the goal line just smashing his face against the wall. He had 9 yards, 2.3 yards per carry. By the end of the game, they switched it up a little bit, which I liked. But, I mean, Roschon was only up to 8 carries for 3.8 yards per carry. Swift had 13 for 20 yards. Yay, he went from 0.8 yards per carry to 1.5. What a stellar improvement.
Yeah.
But, like, the thing I think was interesting, too, is in theory, DeAndre Swift is your third down pass catching back. Roschon was the one that was in there because, first of all, he can actually block a bit better. So when you combine all of those things together, I think right now they are unfortunately they're hanging on 2 things. One, whatever love affair that Shane Waldron has with DeAndre Swift and Gerald Everett. They're just talking about general personnel issues.
Yeah.
And then 2, your sunk cost fallacy. The fact that you're paying this guy X amount of money, which is more than Roschon Johnson, your 4th round rookie, that shouldn't matter. Put the guys on the field that are going to produce for you. And we saw that to an extent with like Nate Davis and Matt Pryor. Davis is healthy enough to be a backup, but not to start. The dude was benched. So be willing to do that here too.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting thing to compare it to looking at the Eagles, who they've been a successful organization for quite some time. Already, they've benched Devin White, who they paid roughly around the same amount of money that the Bears paid DeAndre Swift. They benched Devin White after realizing, hey, this isn't working. Bryce Huff, the edge rusher that they paid a lot of money to, has seen his snap count go down. And they're recognizing, okay, hey, this isn't working out so far. We're not just going to force an issue because we want to be able to admit, hey, things aren't working. So sure, you can admit, the Eagles aren't a perfect team right now by any means, but I like to think that they're, from an organization perspective, they're a lot more sound than the Bears are. And part of that is realizing when to admit their mistakes and say, hey, this isn't working out. Like, they traded Jalen Reagor pretty quickly after realizing, hey, this was a bad pick. Being able to, draft Jalen Hurts when, a lot of people thought, oh, Carson Wentz is the guy in Philly. And then turns out Carson Wentz was terrible. There are just a handful of moves that the Eagles have made where, they were willing to admit their mistakes and, cut their losses before they get too deep into it. I want to see the Bears, especially when you have someone like Ian Cunningham, who, he cut his teeth in that Philadelphia organization. I want to see some of that philosophy transfer into Chicago, but I don't know. We'll see. Like you said, it happened a little bit with this Nate Davis, Matt Pryor situation, but we'll, have to see if that happens with Swift, because I feel like at this stage, it's definitely a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. Yes, you could point to the Eagles' recent issues and say like, oh, the Eagles aren't that great right now. But like, how many playoff berths have the Eagles had since 2010? And then how many have the Bears had?
Yeah.
They're a good operation.
Yeah. Like if the Bears have a 15-year stretch or even just a decade stretch that the Eagles have had, where some people it's like, oh, well, they've lost in the Super Bowl and they've choked in the playoffs, but they still won a Super Bowl out of that. And if they made it to the Super Bowl, they're consistently in the playoffs. I'd take that in a heartbeat. So I don't know.
Do what other smart organizations do.
Yeah.
Quick break here. Then we're going to do a couple more categories and wrap up our show. Okay. Next category we got what's important. Stat. This is a stat from the game that we felt was important. For me, it's Caleb's total passes. He threw the ball 52 times. Now, I think this is important for two reasons. One, that's too many.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, when you have a rookie quarterback, even in the best of situations, make the easy buttons and make things easy for them. Throwing 52 times is not easy, even if you're playing from behind. So that's an issue. But two, again, I'm trying to silver lining a lot of this. The fact that you were technically still like in the game at the end to try to win it. Now you almost had two opportunities. One, unfortunately, strip sack, weren't able to put that drive together. And then two, Jonathan Taylor is able to rip off that run, get the first down, which ended the game. And of course, you didn't have timeouts, which would have been nice because Eberflus handled timeouts poorly. But yeah, 52 times, that's way too many. That number has to come down, and the only reason you can decrease that number is if you, as we talked about just recently, improve the run game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good call, honestly. And in an ideal situation, you're not asking Caleb to throw the ball 52 times, just by nature of, one, the run game needing to be a bit better, and two, you're not playing from behind so much. But I do think it's encouraging that the Bears were at least in it. And I can say that sure, there are the two interceptions that Caleb had in the strip sack, that there's so much more that went wrong outside of that, where I'm not like, okay, this loss is Caleb's fault. Could he have done some certain things better? Absolutely. But I feel like there are a lot of, especially rookie quarterbacks, if they were placed in this exact situation with a poor offensive line, with a non-existent run game. It's like, all right, you have to pass 52 times and keep us in this game. I feel pretty good, at least from what I've seen out of these other rookies from this class. I feel like Caleb did the best job that he could have, more than anybody else in this class. So, time will tell exactly if that ends up being true. And if, Caleb ends up being the best quarterback in this class, I think he will be. But yeah, I think that's a good one. And so my stat that I'm going to do is comparing targets. Cole Kmet had 11 targets. Gerald Everett had 1. And I think that's a step in the right direction. I really do.
Yeah.
And, it's a little disheartening that it took, 3 weeks for Shane Waldron to realize, hey, Cole Kmet's pretty good across the middle of the field. We should take advantage of that. But they did, and down the stretch, it helped the Bears move the ball down the field. And that's part of the reason they scored 13 points in the fourth quarter, is because they remembered that they have Cole Kmet. And I hope that the Bears look at it, on 11 targets, Cole Kmet caught 10 of them, and he had 97 yards, and he had a touchdown. I hope they look at that and say, this is one of the better security blankets you're going to get in the league for a rookie quarterback. And I say that as I don't think Cole Kmet is, like a stellar separator from man coverage. But what I do think he's very good at is sitting in the soft spots of zone coverage, using his big body to work himself open and just sit there and then find a way to come down with the ball. And sometimes that's all you need at the tight end position that, could limit you from being elite, but that still means you can be a very good tight end, which that's what I think Cole Kmet is. So if there's a positive to take out of the offensive performance, I'm glad that they finally realized what they have in Kmet. They started making an active effort to involve him in the offense, and I think it showed up well. So will this happen again in future weeks? I mean, we'll see. But I think this was a very good performance from Kmet, and I'm glad that the Bears finally started to realize in some capacity, hey, Kmet and Everett are not equal. Like, Everett's not a bad player, but Kmet is certainly the better player. And that's much more reflective this week than it was the previous two.
The Jimmies and Joes are more important than your X's and O's.
Mm-hmm.
Our kombucha peak performance moments. This is our defining moment from the game. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery, better athletic performance, increased nutrient absorption, improved wellness, and improved cognitive stamina. Mine is that 12-play, 70-yard drive that led to the Cole Kmet touchdown. For me, it wasn't just, yes, I mean, the Colts were sitting back a little bit more, but they weren't in that full prevent you tend to see at the end of games. But the fact that, the way that they operated, the up-tempo was nice. The little chunks that they were able to take out, I'm going to keep talking about them. I mean, Roschon Johnson, the fact that Caleb Williams was able to get down to Roschon relatively efficiently, right? 1 isn't there, 2 isn't there, 3 isn't there, dump to Roschon. Hey, look, we have 6 yards on a dump off. It's second and, 6, second and 4, whatever it might be. Like, we can do something with that. Now, there were still some issues on that play, on that drive, of course, but Caleb was able to actually get them out of some of those situations. I believe there was a 3rd and 12, which for me, normally, there was a pass to the right to Roma Dunze for that gain there. Normally, as a Bears fan, I'm like 3rd and 12, all right, we might as well punt. But the fact that at this point, with how Caleb is operating and parts of this offense are operating, Rome, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Carter at times even, this is no longer a death sentence. So for me, just that drive made me feel pretty good overall, and that there's opportunity going forward if we can stack more of that. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good call. And looking at the weapons, I don't feel concerned in what the Bears have at the wide receiver position, even with Keenan Allen out. Like, I feel like DJ Moore is a good player. I feel pretty confident Roma Dunze is a good player. Cole Kmet's a good player. You utilize him correctly. I think the one defining performance that I'd have to say, the defining moment, I have to go back to that speed option, which it's more of a negative approach than what you took. But it's just it's a tone deaf way of play calling, and that's not the best way to utilize your personnel. That's not the best way to utilize the space that you have or lack thereof. Baffling on all counts. And to say, hey, this running back who's been really bad the first 2 games and has been bad to this point in this game, you know what? Let's run a speed option with him being the main guy, with no other option of, maybe Caleb can run the ball in. But even then, you saw the defenders to that side that they ran towards.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a chance that Caleb was going to be able to run that ball in. So you pitch it to Swift, who doesn't have an opportunity. He tries to get into hero mode, and it fails tremendously. I just think that's a defining moment where it's like, okay, you're trying to be the smartest guy in the room. You're not. All right. So just don't overthink things. I know sometimes coaches, they get into this, this chess match of, I need to be 3 steps ahead of my opponent at all times. Sometimes that's the case, but there are other times where it's like, you don't need to overthink it. Just make what's abundantly simple and do that. I feel like so many coaches would prefer to be wrong trying to be the smartest guy in the room rather than trying to be wrong on doing the simple thing that makes sense. And obviously, I'm not an NFL coach, so I don't know what goes into that thought process. But as an observer, it's just kind of like, doesn't really make too much sense to me.
I still don't know what this offense is. I still don't know what their goal, like who are they at the core? Like who do they want to be at their core? And the fact that we're 3 weeks in and I can't tell that yet, that's a problem.
Exactly.
Masseter, player of the game. The Masseter can close the teeth with a force of up to 55 pounds on the incisors and 200 pounds on the molars. That's a pretty strong, hefty muscle for how tiny it is. So basically, right, this is our MVP.
Yeah.
Who do you got?
MVP for this one, it's
as good as you can make it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, part of me wants to say Caleb, but I can't after the 3 turnovers that he had. I'd have to go back and look. I mean, to me, maybe Jalen Johnson having that interception, and things were pretty quiet opposite him for the most part over the course of the game. Tremaine Edmonds looked pretty good to me. He had he had a PBU, he had a quarterback hit. He had that interception on top of that additional PBU. And I think in run support, there were some times where it's like, all right, he's finally utilizing that size and that speed in a way that he didn't necessarily utilize it last year. So, I mean, I'd have to go back and watch the tape, but I'd say one of those 2 guys. I don't know if I could choose just one. So I'm going to take a little bit of the coward's way out and declare it a tie, I guess. But upon first watch, those are 2 guys I thought did a solid job.
I almost went defense here because, the defense actually played pretty well. Tremaine Edmonds, obviously, with that pick. I didn't end up going there just because it was more of like a here, take this kind of a pick.
Yeah.
I almost went with Montez Sweat because I kind of called him out earlier. And obviously, he listens to this podcast, so he rose to the occasion, saying he wasn't really impacting the game enough, wasn't feeling enough. But, he had that sack, the one that really should have been an interception. Still don't understand that play, how Anthony Richardson, there's no whistle, but apparently the play's dead, but whatever. He had a couple of tackles for loss. That was impactful in the run game. But I'm saying Rome for me.
Okay.
Because in the first 2 weeks, and we know that he was hurt, right, coming into the second game, there's already been some chirping of, man, you shouldn't have used a pick on a wide receiver there. You should have drafted no lineman, da-da-da-da. And then there was this stuff, unfortunately, with his dad that popped up. I just think that for him to have that be happening during the last couple of weeks and this last week, come out, put up 112 yards, right, and a touchdown, that was very impactful to the game. That was important to the game. I mean, he was a big reason why the ball was able to move. So for me, it was Roma Dunze.
Yeah, and I think that's a good call, just because, especially the first couple of weeks, it's like, why didn't the Bears draft an offensive lineman in the first round? And you could still kind of argue, but like at the same time, they weren't going to move on from Braxton or Darnell Wright, honestly. Yep. And at number 9, you're not taking a guard. I mean, you could try and trade down maybe, but then see if you want to kick like Fuaga or something inside, or trade down for Graham Barton or something. But like, you have that, potentially elite wide receiver prospect. That's not as much as what I have a problem with. So I think Odunze is a fantastic player. I think he's going to be really good in this league. And honestly, today's part of how we show, part of what we saw he could be in the NFL. So definitely encouraged to see how he performed today.
And I know right now Poles' track record in terms of signing free agents at O-line isn't great right now.
Yeah.
But we're one off season away from potentially a very functional, if not good line, depending on how. I mean, you have 2 second-round picks, right? The Panthers are looking better, surprise, surprise, with Andy Dalton. So maybe you're not picking at 33 anymore, but who's to say? I mean, they're winning 14-7 against the Raiders, so good for them. But you have 2 second-round picks. You're going to have some money to throw around. You're going to be able to sign some of these guards and a center even potentially, which again, he's ignored center, so we can't say for sure. But it's nothing. It's harder to find a legit number 1 wide receiver or even a 1B, however you want to put it, than in my opinion it is to find a guard that can at least get in the way. It's just so far been an issue for the Bears specifically.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm with you there. Like it's more like in theory, it's more difficult to be able to find a true alpha wide receiver 1 type. Like I think Rome can be, and he showed today that he could be, as opposed to like a solid guard. And the Bears haven't had much luck with either in the draft of the last couple of years. But we've seen when you have a player who's at the calibers that Odunze was coming out of college. I mean, that was the no-brainer. You take the best player available. I'd chalk it more up to free agency. They just didn't attack the offensive line as much as they should have. Yeah. Going cheap with their, center solution with Coleman Shelton instead of, potentially shelling over a little bit extra money or, spending $8 million at running back for DeAndre Swift instead of taking that, pooling the DeAndre Swift money and the Coleman Shelton money to push in for Lloyd Cushenberry. I don't know. It's an exercise you can go on for hours about how they should have used those resources, but
shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's in the past at this point, and Rome Odunze is a Bear. I'm happy about it, and this is definitely the game that I think he needed to have today.
I'm doing a really mini surprise category for you.
Yeah.
We just did our Masseter, which is very important. Now we're doing our appendectomy.
Okay.
So a player that at this point, we're just gonna say this: they need to step up. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to kick them off a team or anything. So, but they are not pulling their weight. Who would you say?
Okay, I feel like at this stage, it's fair to say DeAndre Swift. And again, we can argue till the cows come home about the poor play of the offensive line, which I agree it's been poor play to this point. But Swift isn't making anything out of what he's been given, and I don't want to say for sure because I don't know the precise number. I don't have the tweet pulled up in front of me, but I want to say I saw DeAndre Swift as the least yards over expected of any running back in the NFL. And when the yards over expected, the yards that you are expected aren't very high, for you to be getting such a negative return on those just isn't acceptable. And it's interesting, you bring it up that in theory Swift would be the 3rd down back, but Roschon's been more that guy. I think that's one thing that Swift did. Like the only thing that he did like somewhat well was, he caught 2 passes and, had a little bit more space. He looked decent there. But if you're getting down to the point, the first 2 downs, Swift isn't performing and you already have a 3rd down back in Roschon Johnson that you like, then why are you going to play him all that much? So I think that they might give him a little bit of a longer leash just because of the money and the resources they put into him. But I think something needs to change and he needs to get better. So, I mean, time will tell exactly, but I don't feel great, honestly, about the start that Swift is off to this year.
This pains me to say this. I hate that I'm even broaching this topic. I got actually his jersey sitting right over here.
Yeah.
Torrey Taylor has been a bit of an issue in the first 3 weeks. Now, I know some individuals, they do the net gain and all that jazz, and they're seeing there's a couple of punts here and there that you gained 18 yards, but part of that is also because the other team didn't move the ball either. But taking today as an example, he had 3 punts. He averaged 42.3 yards, one inside the 20. His long was 54, and his best one was the one where he got ran over. So I don't even understand that either. You look at the other side, Sanchez, the punter for the Colts. Yeah. He had 5 punts. All 5 were inside the 20. His average was at 49.0, so about 7 yards more than Torrey Taylor's. I don't understand what the problem is because, obviously we saw what he did in college. We saw what he was able to do from all the different clips and the conversations and all that kind of stuff. But it isn't translating into the game right now. And that's a problem. Mm-hmm. I'm okay with spending a 4th round pick on a punter if that punter ends up being someone that can truly flip the field for you. Because there's going to be some games coming up where you're playing an offense that's not as terrible with a 39.0 passer rating as the Colts, where you need them to be not just inside the 20, you need them inside the 5. So that he needs to be better.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And I don't want to say that, like, the first couple weeks, Torrey Taylor has been, like, purely in terms of getting the ball inside the 20, he's been all right. But still, I feel like there's still, quite a bit that's being left on the field where you're not getting pinned inside the 10, you're not getting pinned inside the 5. Some of those, like, truly killer punts that you're seeing from his tape at Iowa, we're not really seeing too much of that. So, I mean, the leg strength is clearly there. Obviously, I think on the one punt that he had in the end zone where he got hurt, or not hurt, but knocked over, we clearly saw that. So he has the leg strength to make those type of plays work. But when the field gets shortened a little bit, I feel like, I don't know if it's nerves or something, or I don't know what it is, but I'm with you there. Push it a little bit farther back. He's got some room to work with. He's got a little bit of wiggle room. If he gets enough air underneath it, the defenders can get down the field and punt coverage and, get on the ball. But yeah, it's just, I don't want to say I'm hitting the panic button on him yet. I guess I'm a little higher on his performance, admittedly, than you are. But at the same time, I totally get where you're coming from, where it's like, all right, you're drafting a punter in round 4. You expect him to be very good. And so far he's been okay,
And don't get me wrong, I don't even think he's been bad. Like, I'm not even there. Like, if I'm giving him a grade, I'm giving him like a B, like a B plus, something like that.
Yeah.
I think at this point, again, just unfortunately when it's not his fault he was drafted in the 4th round, but he was. Mm-hmm. I would like you to be an A, just consistently.
Yeah. No, totally fair.
Time to wrap it up. Prognosis period. So this is like a brief look ahead. Like, what does this performance today mean for the week? And, what is that going to look like next week against the Rams, who are fielding all of their backups at this point, besides Matt Stafford, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is another game where I want to come into it as like, oh, the Bears should win this game. And there's a real chance they do, just because of how banged up the Rams are. It's at Soldier Field, which I think will be beneficial. But you have Sean McVay at calling the shots, being the head coach there, and you have Matthew Stafford at quarterback. As long as you have those two guys in place, I don't think the Rams are truly out of most games. And, obviously the Arizona game didn't work out well for the Rams at all. I feel like that's, more or less an outlier essentially. And I feel like, you get the Bears coming into this. I don't expect the Bears offense to put up 41 points or anything like that. So this is an opportunity, though, where it's a game you looked at. It's like, all right, the Bears, I feel like most people would say, like, maybe outside of the Bears bubble, most people would say the Rams would have beat the Bears heading into this year. But now with the opportunity the Bears have, with how injured the Rams are, it's a chance to potentially flip that game and make it a win. You've already had one game flip to a loss with this, the Colts game here, but you can come away from that 2-2. You're still on par with how a lot of people thought you'd start off the year.
Yep.
And then you have Carolina, which, I mean, as we're speaking right now, Andy Dalton's tearing it up for Carolina. So maybe that might not be as much of a gimme, but we'll see. Washington's a winnable game. Arizona could be a little tougher than we expected, but still a winnable game. New England should be a winnable game. Jacksonville, not necessarily impossible that the Bears lose that game. I don't think Jacksonville's all that great, but still, it's a big opportunity the Bears have this week where hate that it happened the way that it did. Hate it for all the guys on the Rams who got hurt, but it's a chance for the Bears to get that, to get that win back and to get that flip in the positive direction, and then head into a couple of games that should be winnable with a little bit of momentum. So that's how I'm feeling about the game. I'm not going to chalk it up as a win by any means, especially with, I thought the Bears would be better against the Colts than they were today, but I definitely feel better about it. Even with the slow start on offense, I definitely feel better about the Bears-Rams now than I did heading into this year.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I mean, like at the beginning of the very beginning of the year, I had it kind of as I'm not sure. I got to see how the Rams are, but I think that because of Sean McVay, because of Matt Stafford, I had it as a probable loss. But how things have shifted, it is now. It's not a guaranteed win. It is winnable, kind of as you said.
Yeah.
And you just got to hope that I think, and I think you've said this too, that you've seen progress from individuals on the offense, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, et cetera, kind of stacking and looking a little better. And you're just hoping that continues into week 4, and that at some point the offensive infrastructure can support some of those improvements. All right, looks like we lost Jacob here. He's spinning a little bit, but that was the end of our show anyway. Look at that, perfect timing. That's what we have today. Wear and Tear, Bare Bones post game. Wow, combining my shows. Wear and Tear, Bears post game show. Bare Bones will be back on Thursday to preview the Rams game. Jacob, he's a part of the team that is doing Bears over Beers. So you can catch his stuff. That's going to be on Wednesdays. I'm not sure what their full rotation is for Bears over Beers, but there's 3 of them. They're going to be popping in and out. Him and Kyrie did a great job for this last one. Anything else you want to leave them with before we got to get out of here, Jacob?
Yeah, so now that I'm back here on my phone, it's been weird. My laptop's been like crashing sporadically, so luckily I was able to pull this up real quick. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what these next couple weeks, how things perform with, from our perspective, the post-game pods and Bears over Beers. But again, it is a stretch of winnable games. I look into this Rams game as probably a 50-50 toss-up. But if you're going to make the playoffs, you need to win these. And I personally believe that unless you look really, really good to close the stretch, if the Bears don't make the playoffs, I think that's the bar that you need to reach with how much you've invested at receiver, the weapons you've added, with the defense you have in place. In theory, this should be a much better team than last year. So far, it's not. Again, still early. Things might change, but you need to start converting those toss-ups to wins. You're going to save your job. So I'd be surprised. Like, Matt Eberflus isn't watching this live right now, but I can say
he's going to watch it later at home, though.
Yeah, he'll watch it later at home, and maybe use 15% off on our kombucha offer that we have. But yeah, I do think that they're going to be. These are games that need to be won if Eberflus is going to save his job. So not off to a great start losing the Colts game, but Rams game is an opportunity to turn things up. So time will tell.
Yeah. At some point, you need to start to not just beat up these lower tier, middle tier teams and not be a lower tier team. You're in a division where the Vikings won today. They beat the Texans 34-7. The team that you lost to last week, you were kind of in the game, but at the same time, it felt funky. I mean, the Packers without Jordan Love, with Malik Willis at quarterback, they won 30-14 against the Titans, a team that you needed a special teams and defensive touchdown in order to beat. Right now, the Lions are up 20-7, on the Cardinals. And the Cardinals, we just said how that game looked against the Rams. So in order to take that next step to these other teams, you need to really start to, again, not just win and beat these teams, but you need to beat them in decided fashion. And the hope is that once you're hitting the divisional games, you feel better about this offense. Yeah, that is all we got today. Bear down, everyone.